Fish Baby Daddy here. Want to talk about filters and filter maintenance and things to think about. Let's get started. So if we're thinking about even the simplest filter is a sponge filter, and all the water is going into the sponge, and you can see all the bubbles and it's shooting out. So basically going into the sponge is the intake, and the outtake will be the bubbles actually going up to the surface. So every good filter is going to have a different spot for the intake versus the outtake of the filter. If you look at this filter above me right here, the water is actually going in right here, up into the filter, and you can actually see that water actually expelling it out. I'm a big fan of getting any of these pre-filter sponges. I think they're great. They actually help clean up a lot of any excess waste that might go into the filter, avoids a lot of clogging in the filter. It helps add a lot of biological bacteria, so it actually helps expand the benefits of the filter. So pre-filter sponges, I think, are really beneficial and should be on almost every single type of filter you have, unless you're actually using a sponge filter. So if you're going with a sponge filter, then obviously, it's impossible to have a pre-filter on it. But you can see out here, you can see that the filter is actually running pretty good, and the outtake is actually going into the system. Every once in a while, what you want to do is you want to lift these up. You want to make sure that there isn't any excess of water almost hitting the top of those, because you don't want that water actually spilling all over the floor, which would be a complete disaster. So, huge fan of the pre-filters, and then making sure that all that medium in there is actually working okay. And you can actually put whatever you want in there. Really, sponges get a bad rap sometimes, and sometimes they think you gotta use like ceramic rings or some other fancy biological media. But really, a good quality sponge can act as mechanical filtration, which can help get rid of any excess debris. And what it can also do is it's a nice harbor for bacteria, so you can actually help you with the cycle. So sponges at a minimum, but I think they're very underrated. They do a great job, and they can, with good scheduled water scheduling water changes, you're going to get good quality water, and the water isn't going to smell. You're not going to walk into a room and go, "Oh my God, it smells like a swamp." So really what it comes down to is making sure your filters are not excessively dirty, where they're actually not able to filter any water, and they're porous, and you're able to get that. And you can wring them out once in a while, and then you can get some good quality media to actually help with seeding another tank and get them going. So a big fan of those. Also a real big fan of the rings. You can see I have bio rings in here with bags. So I get really big bags, and I'll actually put those zippers on them, and I'll actually fill those up with bio rings. And so I might have an entire tank full of nothing but those. And then on another tank, I might just fill up with a bunch of sponges. And so it does both. I have mechanical filtration. I have the ability to actually get rid of any excessive waste. But at the same time, I still always have a lot of good biological media too. So they serve two different purposes, but they can also serve the same purpose too. So really like both of those. I like having some options to actually clean up a tank. In another one of my tanks, I have media in here. You can't see it because it's a little bit deeper into that tank. But over on here, you can see a little bit of some bio rings in there. But what I also have in there is a bunch of this filter floss. And some of this filter floss looks like this cloudy stuff that you kind of just, within a pillow or a stuffed animal or something. You can get this real cheap at like Walmart or something. Sometimes people call this polyfill. But I'm a huge fan of this. It actually really cleans up the water, make it really crystal clear, and it's really cheap. You just want to monitor it probably every week to make sure it doesn't overflow the tank, or it just doesn't bog down in there and it's just a bunch of swampy mess. So you want to actually try to clean this out if you can. I clean it out every week, and it actually really helps polish and get rid of any excessive little particles, and cleans up the tank, makes it look really, really nice. On another one of my series of my tanks, I actually have like a poly filter pad I'll actually put in the tank, and I'll put those in there in layers, and that will actually help clean up the tank and get rid of excessive particles too. So I'll do that in combination of actually having a canister filter, with the canister filter, this is actually another overhead hang on the back, and you can see I got all this biological media in there. And so I'll actually use this hang on the back as a great way of actually kind of keeping my biological. And over here, I'm actually using that as my way of actually polishing the water and keeping it super clean. I mentioned that I have a canister filter. You can see it a little bit in there. There's actually a pre-filter sponge, and you actually see the break in the water right there. That's actually coming from a canister that's actually sitting down here, this flue vol. The great thing about this flue vol is that it does such a good job that I really don't have to worry about actually maintaining it too often. I'll actually monitor it and look at it probably every 4 months just to see how it's doing. Maybe sometimes I'll even wait a little longer. But with the combination of everything else that I have going on, the flue vol canister filter is actually pretty low maintenance. I'm a big fan of actually having sponge filters in, especially when you're in breeding projects. A lot of the fry can actually hang around the sponge, and they can actually nibble on any like little things that might be in the tank too, and it kind of helps the survival rate of some of the fry. It's not, this current is as strong, and it's a little bit less invasive to them, and so I'm a huge fan of the sponge filter especially when you got some fry. In this tank here with my leopard frog plecos, I got a sponge filter, and it's going pretty hard, and it's actually able to get a little bit of a place for my shrimp too to actually come and actually hang out. They love that, and they're really attracted to and drawn to it. But also, I think what also becomes kind of underestimated when it comes to filtration is just think about getting an air stone. An air stone can actually benefit to actually help with aeration, and it can help create great gas exchange at the top of the tank, where you're actually getting carbon dioxide gas exchange to help keep a healthy tank. So I think air stones are very underrated and are kind of bypassed when you're actually thinking about filtration. Within this tank here, I have these mini snowball plecos. I have a big air stone, and I got that running really hard, and I'm trying to get that sponge filter going. But I got that air stone in there intentionally to run really hard, because a lot of times, sometimes these small guys that are actually in this tank, they really like a little bit of current. So if I don't have room for like a wave maker or anything, and don't want to disturb any fry that's potentially in there, getting an air stone in there can kind of help get a little more water circulation too. Another factor I wanted to put in and talk about when we talk about sponge filters, they're great, especially if you have any surface level plants. Like I have this Amazon frog bit, and it does really good with a sponge filter, but would not probably respond very well if I had a flue vol or a canister filter or anything that was breaking the surface that was actually pushing water across the surface. It would probably disturb these plants, and they wouldn't actually do very well. So, you know, different filters for different needs. But I think it's real important that you always want to make sure that you have an intake and an outtake at 2 different spots in your filter. If your intake and outtake are in the exact same spot, you're never going to have good outcomes. And you usually see that with custom tanks that are actually built. You won't see that on canister filters or hang on the back filters or sponge filters. But those are things you want to think about when you're actually doing any kind of customization with any filter. Well, that about wraps it up when I think about filters, what I think about and what I'm actually trying to do when I'm always looking at filters, making sure they're maintained, and what are the purposes of what I'm trying to accomplish. Until next time, Fish Baby Daddy.